Hey everyone, this is the guide for the Guitar Fretboard Scales app just to get you started. Most likely you got to this video from the app, but if not and you want to download the app, use the QR codes on the screen or links in the description. In general, this app was created for scales. It also has chords, but if you just want an app for chord diagrams, then better use a different app because this one won't be so comfortable to use, even though it also has chord diagrams. And it also has Fretboard Trainer, which I will briefly cover at the end of the video because there are just a lot of things to cover there, and I'll probably have to create a separate video just to cover the trainers alone. Okay, let's start from the most basic settings in the app. By default, as you can see here, there is 6-string guitar knee standard tuning. So Eat All Day, Get Big Easy, these are open notes. If you want a different tuning, maybe you play bass guitar, go to Menu, Tuning. And here you can select bass tunings, ukulele, 7 strings. Let's select bass just for example. If you cannot find the tuning that you want, or maybe the tuning that you want is locked like this one, you can reveal its octaves just to see and add a custom one. Name, number of strings, the note sound that will play when you tap on the fretboard, and here you can configure open notes of a tuning. I will not save it, but you can save it and apply. No matter which tuning you select, you can see here 24 frets. You can change this in the menu settings and change it to 22 if you have 22 frets guitar. Also, you could notice that all these frets are evenly spaced across the fretboard. It is because it's much easier to spot some repeating patterns this way. But if you want that real guitar look, you can go to Menu, Settings, and switch off this option. This will make all the frets proportional, and they will get smaller towards the bridge of the guitar. The only problem with this is that they are very wide and not a lot of them fit on the screen, but you can partially fix this in the settings by changing this number to something like 40. The higher the number is, the less spread out they are. Now you can see that there are more frets here on the screen, but if you zoom out, you can still see that they are proportional, so they are bigger here and smaller here. If you're left-handed and got yourself left-handed guitar, you can switch to left-handed. This will mirror the fretboard horizontally, like this. And the last setting here is the dark theme that you can switch to if you want. And now let's go over the main features of the app. At the top you can see here there is a toolbar. It is scrollable because there are a lot of icons there. On the left side you can select the root note or the key of a scale, and here you can select the scale or a chord. There are a lot of different scales here, like major, minor, pentatonic, blues scale, all the major scale modes including major and minor scale. And these are chords, 7 chords. The most common scales and chords are free in the app. Here you can see the interval formulas for all these chords and scales. And most likely you will use just a couple of them, and for that you can add them into favorites list, like this. And once added, you will get these arrows here that you can use to quickly switch between them. Once the scale is selected, you will see all the notes of that scale, and you can change different display options. The first one just shows the markers, the notes, intervals, and both. And here you can control whether you want to see outside notes or outside the intervals. All of these colors that you can see here are customizable. To change the colors of markers, go to Menu and Scale Palette, and here you can select the scale palettes. There are 12 distinct intervals, and for each intervals you can have a different color. Let's select this one. In the free version of the app you can also add a custom one. You can assign different color for each interval. You can also link the colors, and when you change the color it will apply it for all of them at the same time. Text color too. But if you want to highlight some interval like the root note, you can just disable this linking and select a different color for the different intervals, not just for the root. Then save and apply. You can also select the fretboard style here. There are a bunch of fretboard styles here, some are free, some are not. You can also select the inlays. Let's change to this one. In the free version of the app you will not be able to create a custom fretboard palette, but you can see the demo of how that is done. So pretty much you can change any color here for the fretboard. You can even change different color for different string here. But you will not be able to save this in the free version of the app. The next set of icons is for patterns or shapes, however you want to call it. You can open this patterns menu, and this will show you all the patterns that are available for the minor pentonic in E standard tuning. You can select it. So this is the pattern. You see here 1 out of 2, that means that this pattern is available in 2 locations on the fretboard, and if you tap one more time it will switch to that other location. You do not have to keep this menu open to be able to switch between patterns. You can use arrows. These arrows switch to the nearest pattern, and it doesn't matter in which order these patterns are here, it will always switch to the nearest one. You can use this dice icon to turn on or off this patterns mode, so there is no need to always open menu and select it from there. And if you don't like these markers that are outside of a pattern, you can disable them in the settings here. Or you can make them visible, but make them less visible by changing this number to something like 10. Now they're less visible, less distracting. Now let's switch to the major scale, because I want to show you groups. So this scale in E standard tuning has several groups, the most common patterns and 3 notes per string. And if you use arrows and you are at the very end of the fretboard and you tap one more time, it will switch to the next group. But if you want to learn just common shapes, you don't want it to switch, you can focus on the group, and now when I tap it, it will not switch to the next group, it will cycle through all the patterns within this group. When the pattern is selected, you can play it sequentially by swiping up or down. Chords are also supported, so let's select major chord. Here are a lot of different patterns for the major chord: open chords, closed and barré, triads, inversions of those triads, arpeggios. For the open chords, you can see here the root note in front of the name. That is because these are open chords and they are not movable, because open notes are not movable. So let's select this one. These are open notes and it is not movable. So this pattern is available only for the E root. If you want to select A major, you can change to A and select it. Or you can just tap on it and it will ask you whether you want to switch the root to a different note, and it switches and changes. For the movable shapes, it doesn't matter which root is selected. So this is E major chord. If I switch to G major, it will just transpose this shape to a different location to have G major. Patterns also can be strummed by swiping up or down. And in case of arpeggios, you see here that if any shape has more than 2 notes on the string, it is considered a shape that should be played sequentially. So arpeggios will play sequentially. Not all scales and chords are covered with patterns. Only the standard tunings for this instrument: bass 4 strings, 5 strings, ukulele 4 strings, 6 strings and 7 strings guitar. These are covered, and the most basic scales and chords for them are covered with the patterns. But you can add your custom patterns for the rest of the tunings and scales. In the free version of the app, you can add 3 patterns per scale and tuning combo. So if you select some tuning like drop D, for example, for each scale or chord in that tuning you can add 3 patterns. And that is it for the patterns. I will cover all the features on the toolbar, but first let's go over the smaller ones and then I will get back to bigger ones. The first one here is the simple metronome. You can change the number of beats per bar all the way up to 12. You can control how each beat is played, so this one is muted, this plays just the usual beats, and this one is playing accent. In case of accent, it will only play the first beat of the beat. So if you have here 16 notes, which subdivides the beat into 4 notes, only the first one will be accented and the rest will be the usual beeps. So here is the BPM, you can change it to here or by selecting from the list. This is subdivision, let's start it. So this one plays quarter notes, which means 4, 4, 4, 1 note per beat. Now it will play 2 notes per beat, triplets, 3 notes per beat, and 4, and swing. And you can change here different sounds for these beats. You do not have to keep this open, you can close it and it will still play it in the background. The next feature here is mask. For example, if you want to mask some area, let's mask this from 2nd to 5th fret and apply. So now only this area is visible, the rest is hidden. If you change the root, it will ask you whether you want to move this area to the new location so that it preserved these shapes that you selected. If I say yes, it will just move it to the new location here, as you can see. But if you decline, it will keep the mask in the same location, but all the notes will change because you changed the root note. There are a couple of different selection options here. You can select individual cells, you can select the whole fret, you can select the whole string here. This one cleans everything, this one moves, and this one focuses on the selected area. Let's focus back again. And here you can select different masks and apply them from the list here. If you want to remove the mask, you can just tap on this button. The next 3 icons is responsible for the editing notes on the fretboard. This icon means that the fretboard is locked, and when you tap on the fretboard, it changes nothing here. This one is multi-selection. That means that if you tap on the note, it will hide it or show it all over the fretboard. And the middle one is a special one because it allows you to select individual notes. And when you switch to a different one, it will reveal all those 4 notes all over the fretboard. And it doesn't matter what happens afterwards, if you select the middle one, it will always restore your previous selection. In general, when you edit the fretboard and you selected some notes that make up a scale or a chord, it will load that scale. So let's select here, for example, the augmented chord. And you see E augmented is loaded, and even the note name was changed because the E augmented has a B sharp instead of C here. The same happens for the intervals. So the static interval when the scale is not selected is flat 6, but if you select this one, now it becomes E augmented, and for E augmented the formula is 1, 3 and sharp 5th. And the last icon here is the snapshot feature. So if you configure something on the fretboard and you want to save it into the picture, you can do it here. This is the high resolution. I would say keep it at 512, it is of a good quality. This is the fretboard area, you can save the whole fretboard area, that means all 24 frets, only wherever you see on the screen, and the frets range. And this one is an optional title that will be drawn on top of the picture, and you can edit or remove, and you can edit it, the text. And when you save it to the gallery, it will appear in your Photos app. So whatever app you use for photos, you can open it and you can find those pictures there. Now let's look at these 2 related features. So there is a scale, all the intervals and notes of a scale. And the closest music theory concept to this feature is the scale harmonization, where you take each scale degree and find the respective chord, and you can use these chords to build chord progressions. If you do it manually, you would do it like this. You would take C, E, and G, and this amounts to C major chord. You can see these notes here, C, E, and G. If you take D, F, and A, this is the minor chord. If you look at the intervals, you can see that the distance from C to E is the major third, and that is what makes it major chord. And the distance from D to F is the minor third, and that's why it is minor. Each column here shows you all the chords and scales that start on this note as a root and consist only out of notes within the scale. So none of these chords will show you any notes that are outside of a scale. So they will not consist out of notes that are outside of a scale. You can highlight this chord on top of a scale by tapping on it, and these badges will show you the intervals of a chord. So this is the minor chord, so this is the root, D minor, so the root D, and this badge shows the root, the minor third and perfect fifths, and you can see that this chord is for the 2nd degree of a scale. You can change the appearance of these badges here in the settings, and if you want to remove this chord, you can do it here. Not only chords are available here for selection, but also scales and modes, and let's select D Dorian mode. When you learn modes, you could hear people say that modes share all the same notes, but just start on a different note of a scale. And you can see it here. So all the notes between C major scale and D Dorian are shared. It's just that D Dorian starts on the note D. And because it starts on the note D, and if you start measuring the distance from the note D to all other notes, it will result into a different interval formula, because distance and interval is the same. So here is the formula for the major scale, and this one is for Dorian. And if you now play a single note C drone and play all these notes, it will sound like C major scale. But if you play the D drone on the background and play all these same notes, it will sound like D Dorian. It will sound different even though all the notes are the same, just because the relation or the distances from the D note to all the other notes is different than the distances from C note to all the other notes. Another concept that you can see here visually is the relative minor. And let's select here minor scale. You can see here that for C major there is an A minor scale, which is a relative minor to C major. And they share all the same notes because C major and A minor are modes as well. So the C major is the Ionian mode, and minor scale this is the Aeolian mode. There are two problems with this feature. They are not problems, but it's good to know about them. The first one is that even though borrowed chords are okay chords to use for chord progressions in the major scale, they will not be on these lists because those chords have some outside notes. So you can use any chords for the chord progressions, but only the chords that consist out of notes within the scale will be displayed on these lists. And the next problem is when you select something like major pentatonic scale and you go here, you will not see all the chords that are available for this scale because, for example, D minor, this is a valid chord for the major pentatonic scale, but it is not on the list because major scale has only 5 notes, and not all notes of D minor chord are present here, and that's why it is not in the list. So if you want to find all the chords that can be used for chord progression for the major pentatonic scale, you should do it inside of a major scale, which is a parent scale for the major pentatonic. You can see here. So the parent scale is 7 notes, and the major pentatonic has only 5 notes, the same intervals, but 5 notes, and it leaves out the 4th and the major 7th interval. Now, this table allows you to select the modes. Instead of just showing them on top of the scale, you can select them. This is not the mode, but it has all the same notes, and that's why it's here. But if I select D Dorian from this table, it will show you D Dorian. That's it. You can also switch between modes by long pressing the note. So if I long press on C and select this option, so switch the key to C and keep notes, it will keep all the notes where they were. It just switches the root note, and that makes it C major. If I do it for F, this will make it F Lydian. That is because all the modes share all the notes between each other. Only the resulting interval formulas will be different. And the next feature here is this one. So this allows you to override the note color, this marker color, when you can build the chord starting on that note. So if I turn on all of this, I can now see that all the markers were overridden, all the colors for these markers, and I can now see straight on the fretboard that I can play for C major scale, C major chord, D minor, E minor, F major, and so on, and B diminished. And you can see all these chords here, so B diminished, C major, D minor. If I switch to something like harmonic minor scale, you can see that these colors start to split, and that means that for A flat you can play major chord, minor chord, and diminished. And you can see the same here. A flat, major, minor, diminished. And this feature has the same problem with pentatonic scales. because the pentatonic scale doesn't have all the notes, and a D chord here doesn't have overridden the color, because this major pentatonic does have all the notes of D minor chord. And there is this simple feature, which is not related to previous two, that you can use to highlight some intervals. Let's highlight the first, the major third, and the perfect fifths. This will just highlight it with the border. Here you can see these intervals. And they are grouped here because, let's say, I select this one, flat fifths, sharp fourths, and sharp 11ths. These are grouped together because they will always be displayed in the same place on the fretboard. So if you have C root note, and let's select something like C Lydian, this is sharp fourth. If I select now diminished chord, flat fifths, it will be at the very same location, and sharp 11ths too. So that's why they are grouped here. And the last feature that I want to show you before we go to trainers is this one. This is Enharmonic settings. It is related to sharps and flats. And there are 12 notes, and each note can have different names. For example, C sharp and D flat. Those are two different names for the same note. And the same applies to intervals. You can have sharp fourths and flat fifths. Those are the same intervals with the distance of 6 semitones from the root note. And these are correct intervals, correct notes. This means that you want to see correct intervals and notes relative to the selected scale, because one scale can have C sharp, another scale can have D flat, even though this is the same note. And the same happens with intervals. And this feature exists because first, when you learn notes and intervals, you probably learn only one notation, like all sharps. Let's select notes here. So you would learn all the notes like this: C, C sharp, D, D sharp. And when you learn all these notes and you remember where they are on the fretboard, you may be confused when you see that when you change the root note and different scales, all those note names become different. So you could just see some scale and see here E double flat instead of D. And for that reason, I added this feature where you can just switch from correct intervals and notes to your static ones, in case you just don't care about the correct intervals and notes. Maybe you want just to see the scale and its notes on the fretboard, and you care only about you being able to find the note on the fretboard because you learned them only, for example, you learned only sharp notes. And let's look at the correct intervals and correct notes. First one is correct intervals or static intervals. So if you disable them, they will be static. Let's go to correct intervals first. So all these formulas are considered correct intervals. Correct, I mean, so for Lydian you have sharp fourth. This is a correct interval for the Lydian. And there is a reason why this is like this, because all these modes originate from the major scale, and the author of such notation wanted to tell you that you have to take major scale and sharpen the fourth note, and that's going to be Lydian. The same for augmented, because this is based on the major chord. This is sharp fifths and not flat six, even though this could be flat six, and it would change nothing. It would result in the same notes. And here you have diminished sevenths. This is double flat 7. And you could take major 6 instead, and that will be the same chord. But you take double flat 7 because it would be weird if we used the major 6 in the chord that has 7th interval. So when you select any of these chords or scales, you can, and this is turned on, you will see all these same intervals here displayed for the scales that you select here. But you can also select static intervals. Here are different intervals, and you can see here that if I turn on these semitones here, you can see that flat fifths and sharp fourths is the same interval, just different names, because this is 6 semitones from the root note. And sharp 11th is also here, even though this has 18 semitones from the root note, because sharp 11th will land on the same place on the fretboard as these two. And you can see it here. So let's select something that has sharp 11th. So the distance from this note all the way here is 18 semitones, and this is sharp 11th. But the distance from this note to this one is sharp 4th or flat 5th. And because I cannot display here sharp 4th and here sharp 11th, I display sharp 11th everywhere because the chord requires this. So that's why they are grouped the way they are. And now that we configured here static intervals to be all flats and these simple numbers, we can look at what that setting does. So for Lydian, you can see here that sharp 4th is the correct interval. Now we disable this and it shows you flat 5th because flat 5th is now the static interval, and it doesn't matter which scale you select here, it will always, for this interval, it will always show you flat 5th. And these outside intervals and outside notes also don't care about the selected scale because the naming for them is ambiguous. I just take these names from the setup for static intervals and notes. And now let's look at the notes. So for notes, you can see here as well that each note out of 12 have different names. So this note have different 5 names. So it can be C double sharp or F triple flat. And you can see here C sharp, D flat. All of these names is the name of the same note. And let's look how the key and the intervals affect the note names. So let's select here Lydian. You can see that for C Lydian we have F sharp, which is the correct note because this interval is correct, sharp 4th. And if we calculate which note this interval produces, it will be F sharp. I could select here flat 5th for the Lydian scale, and this is the same interval and this is the same note. So F sharp and G flat is the same note. Technically this changes nothing, but this notation is not correct for Lydian scale. And this depends on the root and depends on these intervals. You can change the root and you can even end up with double sharps and some triple flats and so on. You can see here, if you select this G flat 5th, it will produce G double flat and B triple flat and so on. And now if I select C Lydian here and look at the notes, you will see here F sharp. And if we configure here notes to be, for example, all flats, let's say, and now I disable this setting, it will show you here a G flat. And now when you see here static notes, it doesn't matter which scale in which note. You can select even C sharp as the root note, and you can see here it still shows D flat because static note is D flat. And as I said, this is useful for when you learned all sharps, for example, for notes like this, all sharps. And now it doesn't matter which scale you select, even scale that has flats, it will always show you sharp notes, and that's it. So this is beneficial for that. Another setting that I can show you here is you can change the naming of intervals as well. So English naming, here minor second, major second, diminished third. Symbols, this is the solfege, which is used mostly for vocals, but I added it anyway. And these are semitones, so you can plot semitones distance from the root right on the fretboard. So if you select this and leave the page, it will apply. So if you don't want this to apply, don't leave the page until you select what you want to keep. And this one is strictly per indication. You can just compare some different naming for the intervals. The same goes for notes. You can change here different notes, German, solfege again, Cyrillic, and so on. And the last thing that I wanna warn you about is this editing or adding scale. So this feature is just a preview. This will not, this note will not be saved in a scale. When you add a scale, all you add is a scale formula. And this formula will be saved. The rest, all these notes that you can see here, all these comparisons to different intervals and notes, this is just for you to see how different notes for different roots form based on the interval names that you select. So this is just for education. And that is it for this feature. And finally we got to the trainer. It is located in the menu trainer. There are a lot of different games here, notes, intervals, scales, ear training. All of them are free, as well as all the parameters, except these four, but I just keep them B because I spent a lot of time creating this melody generator and these games in general, but they turned out to be extremely complex and you don't need them anyway. You can see here that when I change the game, this icon changes too. That means that different games may have different parameters, but some parameters may be shared across games. So for example, if I select this selection here for the note games and switch to a different note game, this will be the same here. You should treat these games as a sandbox in general, because you decide how you want to train it, what you want to train it, and how easy or complex you want to make it using these settings. So there is no a list of exercises from easy to complex, and you have to manage it yourself. Let's start from the first game, identify note. You can select here all the notes that you want to train on. You can select here whether you want to combine sharps or flats. If you select combine, this note, C sharp and D flat, which is the same note, just different names, will be combined into one and be treated by the trainer as one. But in order for this combination to work, you have to select both of these. So if you select D sharp, it will not combine with E flat. You have to select both. If you don't select this combined sharps and flats, this will ask you randomly one time C sharp, one time D flat. And let's start this game. You can see here it asks you which note that is, and you have 6 options to answer. You can change the number of options here. You can make 3 here, 3 options only to make the game easier. So let me answer this one, and it asks you for the next note and so on. The next game is find note. This one asks you to find the note on the fretboard. It doesn't matter where you find it. You can find it here, here, or here. It will count it as correct no matter whether on this area you find it. And you can change the size of this area in the settings too. Next one is find note on area. This one is simpler version of previous one. So it highlights some area where you have to find it for notes, and that makes it easier. This one is the same as area, but it highlights the fret. So it highlights the fret where you have to find it. This one highlights string. And this set of games is for notes, but you have to find all the locations of the note on the area. So if you asked to find the A, you have to select A everywhere on the fretboard for it to count it as correct. And then it will switch to the next note. You have here the find all locations string guided. So this will guide you string by string. It will guide you, so find G sharp, then on this string, and so on until you find all locations. This is the same for frets. And this one is the same as for strings, but it only guides you the first note. So like this, let's say D, select D, and the rest you have to fill in yourself without any guides. And the same for fret. The next set of games are for intervals, but these are not classic intervals. It doesn't care about the distance actual for the intervals. This one is for you to be able to navigate the fretboard. So the point of the game is for you to be able to find the interval of a scale relative to the root note. For example, if you know that scale has perfect fourth interval like this one, and you are currently somewhere on this root note, and you know that you can find it here, you can find it here, and you can find it here. So the point of those games to learn intervals relative to root, despite the direction. So it doesn't matter whether this one is descending or ascending. And in case of descending, for example, from the distance from this note to this one is actually the descending fifths, not the ascending fourth. But it will ask you for fourths in such case, because when you have a scale and when you improvise, all you care about where all those intervals are on the fretboard relative to the root note, and you don't care which direction, how many octaves they are apart. So it may ask you this one and this one. The actual distance is probably 11ths, but this one is 4 because the scale has the perfect fourth, and it doesn't care about the octave. So given that, let's go to trainer and look at these trainers now. In the settings, you can select which intervals you want to train on. You can select several names for the same interval, and you can select flat fifths, sharp fourths, sharp 11ths. All of these will be asked randomly, one after another. And let's start. This one shows you 2 notes, and you have to say which interval of a scale, because this is not just for intervals, this is the intervals within the scale. And you have to answer whether this is the unison or wherever the interval is. The next game is find interval. Here you are asked to find the interval. Again, it doesn't matter whether you find ascending interval, descending, or whether this interval will be several notes apart, which makes it not major third, it makes it something else, but it doesn't care, as long as you know where it is. You can select it here, you can select it here, you can select it anywhere, or here for example, no matter whether the distance is the close or far. This one is find interval on area, so the second note will be within this small area, just like for notes, and this is for just the same as for notes, but for fret and string. Okay, you can see it here. You should find flat fifths on this. The next games are for scales. You can select here the scale that you want to train. You can select here either one root or multiple ones at the time, and it will ask you randomly these roots. Let's select one root and start this game. It selects random location of that root, so it could select it here or anywhere on the fretboard, and you have to fill in the rest. Right now it starts only from the root note. You have to fill in, and then it will switch. It will start from a different root if you play within the single root, or it may start with a different key if you selected several. You can start on a random note, and in this case it will start not on E always, it may start on any note, and you have to fill in the scale. And the same game here for intervals, is just instead of notes it will show you intervals of a scale, and you have to fill in the rest. Then you have identify note here. You select which notes you want to train. This is ear training exercise. You can select the note range within which you want to train this note. If you're a newbie, you may select one octave to not be confused why the same note sounds completely different. But let's select the high range here and start. So you have the note played, and you have to answer which note that is. And when you tap on the wrong one, it plays it again, so that you knew what you have to answer until you answer. Now you have interval game, and unlike previous interval games, this one cares about ascending, descending, whether you want both. This one cares whether this is sharp fourths or sharp 11ths, because these both have different semitone distances. You can also select the note range within which you want to find these intervals. Let's start. It plays 2 consecutive notes, and you have to tell which interval that is. It can be ascending or descending interval, wherever you selected there. The next game is a bit simpler, because this one has fixed root. Here you can select the root from which you want all these intervals to start or end on. So if you select this root, and I select ascending scheme root to some note, that means that all the intervals that you are asked starts on C and goes to some note. And for descending, it starts on some notes and goes to C. And you can change these schemas here. So now all the ascending intervals will start from C note. And that's gonna be all for this video. I may create other videos for some specific features because even this video is already too long as for an intro guide. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the comments. You can also use request a feature option. This just opens your email app with my email pre-filled so that you can send me an email. And if you have complex questions, then better use this option because then I will be able to respond with some pictures if needed. And if you ask me a question via email like this, then better check it from time to time. I will respond back to your email, check the spam folder, because some people message me and then I respond and they don't respond back, and I don't even know whether they saw that email. Probably they expect that email to come back to this app and not to their email app. So check your email. I usually respond quickly, and that's going to be max 1 day because of different time zones that we can be in. And that's it. Thank you for watching and bye.